You it. I mean it. My name is Enid. You know it. I mean it. You know my name is Enid. I mean it. I mean it. I'm Enid. I mean it. You know I really mean it. I mean and I mean it because you know my name is Enid. Diddly 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 diddly. You know it. You mean it. You know my name is Enid. I been it. I seen it. You know my name is Enid. I'm Enid. I been it. You know I'm really mean it. I been it and seen it. You know my name is Enid. My name is Enid. I've seen it. You know I really mean it. And if you wanna see it, then you know my name is Enid. I been it. I seen it. I really, really mean it. And if you ask me, then you know my name is Enid. Woof. I got some of the stupidest songs on the internet, and you know that I mean it. I mean it. You know I really mean it. And if you gonna ask you, then I'll tell you my name's Enid. Woof. Wow. Okay, everybody, gather around for story time. Because I'll tell you what, if there's one thing that's going to happen here, it's Enid. He means it. You know, I really mean it. I mean it. I'm Enid. I've seen it. Great programs. I'm Ingrid Bernal, Hankrin Fernail here. Welcome to Runehammer. Hey, it's Friday afternoon and it's 3 o'clock. That means it's time to Runehammer and rock. I'm going to jump up on the internet and tell a tale. And when I'm done, I'm going to make a few sales. Wow. That was basically a summary of my entire life. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out. Wow. Let's get busy. I mean it. I mean it. You know my name is Enid. I mean to my players, and when I mean it. Hi. What are we talking about? Oh, I remember all of a sudden. I remember it's season 3. Season 3 of my game, my home game. I should probably be, for composition purposes, I should be like right here. This allows for, well, there should be infographics right here. Picture of like a car accident. Should be right here. I mean it. I mean it. You know my name is Enid. It's pretty cool to have this like right here on my, here. This is where this should be for compositional purposes. Right here on my desk. You got it out so I could pull everything together for Cry of the Stingbat. New Shadow Dark Gauntlet that will be up on the store here. Probably later today. So it's all done. I'm just waiting for Kelsey's final nod of, yes, it's terrible. Release it. Once I get that, I will release the horror unto the world for a few lousy ducats. You will play it. But we are not here to talk about that today. That was a shameless plug. Hi, everybody. What am I here to talk about? Season 3. Many of you have been following the Dirty Jobs crew from a long ass time ago. We started with Old School Essentials. Not quite right when it came out, but definitely at the front edge of it all. And it was grand. It was grand. It was glorious. It was during the pandemic. So now fast forward 3 años, just about 3 años, maybe not quite, just under. And our first season was this sort of sweeping epic, right? It was basically inspired by Dave Arneson's World of Blackmore. If you even want to go a little further back, go back to Bronstein, right? This is first fantasy campaign type stuff. And then I also wanted to, I had players who really never played D&D. One dabbler, but no real just like been down there in the trenches of D&D before. And so when it came to the Old School Essentials season, the first season of Dirty Jobs, I had to introduce these guys, my homies, to D&D proper as a life way, right? Not just as like something we're going to do on Monday nights. No, a way of being, a way of thinking, a way of existing that is beautiful. I had to introduce them to this. And we had to cover like this gamut of things, right? Because I wanted them to know what it's like to level up, to build a wizard, to endure the long turn times of a wizard. Yes, you know who you are. You know, just be honest about it. How to, like facing a crowd of skeletons, right? Dealing with a dragon, having a shape-shifting foe that seems like they're an ally, being trapped in a dungeon for too long, and also spending too long shopping for items, and all these things, all these great tropes and traditions of our glorious life way. I had to introduce them to. That was season 1. We did this sweeping story that really foundationally altered the world that Dave Arneson created so long ago, which we had already only loosely based our world on that. We weren't ever reading really anything about Blackmore in any way. We just wanted that fun feeling of piggybacking on a masterwork from the vintage era, right? But our events changed that world so much over the course of so much play that it really did become our own world, and we changed its name to the North Holds. And the reason we changed that name is because the monarchy fell in the course of our play. There was no longer a place unified under a single name. There are these holds, and holds aren't even really kingdoms or baronies or duchies or any of that stuff. A hold is just a loosely sort of walled or defended space that is identified by a certain people or a heritage or ancestry. A hold is, I mean, that's like one of the lowest forms of social organization you can get into, right? A hold is like, yo, guys, we're going to like make sure that we don't all die. You mean this? No, that is my own custom creation. That's Xenothrax right there. You cannot buy that. I sculpted that bad boy myself. Okay, so that was season 1. This sweeping epic that not all characters survived. Some became vampires. The whole political and like sort of danger landscape of our world was radically altered. Then we sort of, things shifted. 30 years passed. In season 2, one of my player characters in the group was the daughter of one of the characters from season 1 and was a disgruntled daughter. And in the course of that second season, lo, how they changed their approach. Now, my players at this point really had a good handle for what D&D is. So now they are in that funny mood players get in where they want to monkey wrench things, right? They want to try something opposite of what they would do in a former life. And so rather than doing this kind of sweeping journey type campaign, they thought it would be amusing and interesting to basically choose the foundational force of evil in their world and confront it directly, right? With no side quests, no shenanigans, no helping out old ladies or finding lost children, no gathering chickens, no times in the tavern. They just went straight to the underbelly of the world to end the plague of vampirism itself at its source. This led to a sort of season which was only about 6 months, 7 months, something like that. Yeah, about 7 months. And in the span of 7 months, covered, let's see, about, what is it, 14 or so sessions. So a much smaller. Season 1 was 31 sessions. And so a far smaller scope, but also smaller in conceptual scope, right? It was just like a mission. They went after this mission, and really only one of them came out of that mission. Well, 2 of them came out of that mission alive. One of them fundamentally changed. And the other, Adelaide, our priest, sort of came out of it alive, survived it, but then said, you know, I'm going back. I'm going back. And that was a big moment of just like, I'm not going to keep going. I'm not going to be in season 3 would be the meta way to say it, right? She just said, you know, it's time for me to go home. I need to go back and tell everyone what happened and find out what happened. So those of you who've been following all the recaps, I don't need to retell the stories, but I'm bringing you now to season 3. So season 3 begins at the far end of our world, the northwestern corner of our world, which we never even got past the midline of our world as far as going from east to west. And up in this far northwestern reach, as everyone here will be finding out very soon as you play in the North Holds later this summer, this is a remote, sort of ice-encrusted, snowy supermountain, almost like the Himalayas sort of up there. And the reason that season 3 begins there takes us to the story that we are about to embark upon. This video being the first session recap for season 3 of the Dirty Jobs crew. Now, technically we have 2 sessions under our belt so far, but the first one was character creation and then a little bit of experimentation. And then the second session, which is sort of like, sort of session 1 proper, we also were at the very end of the Crown and Skull playtesting process. And that session really cemented the final changes to the Crown and Skull rules system that we really needed, because my players kind of pushed things really to their edge and in some cases kind of broke the seams and gave us those final changes that we really needed to make Crown and Skull what it needs to be, to face uncomfortable truths, which is a really big part of game design. And for those of you who are interested, I did put up a sort of lengthy post on Patreon a couple weeks ago about some of the spiritual and philosophical approaches and properties that a person can benefit from in the game design process. And man, one of the biggest ones is being really comfortable with like unwanted truths, right? And facing them openly and letting the psychology of players guide you even when you don't want it to take you to the places it takes you. So, that's all that. So what happened in session 0 and 1? Before I want to get into that, I want to introduce you to our new characters. So tasty, so refreshing. We have 4 new characters for the season 3 of the Dirty Jobs crew, and these are the 4 core players who have been through thick and thin with me all these 3 years now, who some of them started out being like, D&D, why the fuck would I bother with that, now to pestering me endlessly on text messages asking when we're going to play next. We do play about every other week and sometimes every week, so we have a pretty spicy pace that we keep. We're back to playing in my basement, which I really enjoy. It doesn't have maybe all the amenities, but we do have our own mini fridge, a dedicated D&D mini fridge. And there's just something special about playing D&D in a basement. It's just like this bunker feeling of safety and power. So we have these classic 4 characters, and I generally keep their identities pretty anonymous so that I don't sort of sell my friends on the internet. But there was one post that I made a while back, if any of you have seen it, where it's our commemorative photo from medieval times, and props out to these guys. So the 4 new characters, first of all, we have Rana. Now, Rana is the only character to span all 3 seasons. Rana is an elven character, and in season 2, started dabbling with the dream world and the magic that can arise from accessing and tampering with the dream realm, which is sort of some kind of a dimension that's under our dimension, almost like the quantum realm or something. And the longer that this character delves, the stronger they get. But at the end of season 2, Rana, who used to be known as Aura, the druid, who used to be known as Galmorn, is the son of Galmorn. And so there's this sort of descendancy through the seasons. So Aura, the druid, passed through the dream realm, not even knowing if he would survive it, and popped out of an apostle. So if you remember this, I know this stuff gets a little crazy, but there are these characters who are frozen in perpetual dreaming, and they're sort of the hoods. The opening of their hoods are actual gateways in and out of the dream realm. Rana used one of these gateways and popped out of one of these apostles, these dreamers, but you can't control really where you pop out. Popped out of this sort of dream portal in the far northwest, in these frozen peaks, in this tiny little cave, almost like a hermit's cave, where this dreaming apostle is like freezing and blue and has been there for decades, dreaming to keep open this portal to the dream realm. This is Rana. Now, Zach, my player, has renamed his character from Aura to Rana as part of like AD&D, or almost like commonly held elvish myth that when elves change like drastically during life or come of age, they change their names and take on new names with new meanings. And Zach is definitely the heaviest role-playing character in our group, or player, I should say. Characters don't role-play, players do. And is, as a player, is very open to a lot of role-playing, even like emotional role-playing, sort of, doing the voice and all that kind of stuff, which is not that common in our group. The other 3 of my players are not always tremendously comfortable with doing that, but it does kind of come and go with the moment, like when the moment is spicy, they'll really get into that sort of voice level of role play. But Zach does it kind of all the time. So that is our first character. This is Rana the Dreamwalker, still playing a caster. And by the way, we are playing in Crown and Skull, as I mentioned earlier. So Rana is creating custom spells from scratch using hero points, which are earned in play as experience. You will find out all about Crown and Skull very soon as these releases begin to come your way. Okay, our second character in season 3 is Sean. Now, this one is a funny one. Sean is spelled Ciogn. So it's like this extremely, almost like Gaelic kind of name, right? So you say it out loud, it's just like Sean. Oh, yeah, I know Sean. He actually works at the parking garage down there. No, not that kind of Sean. It's a sort of a Gaelic or more old world sense of the word Sean. Also an elf. And I don't know if my player would say this openly, but doesn't fully know his identity in the group, is definitely interested in spell research and casting, but has kind of hedged his bets in the early game with a decent supply of armor and weapons. And this is a kind of a classic, goes back to the greatest traditions of elf play, right? Is that you hybrid cast and combat. And so without the class in a book, because there are no classes in Crown and Skull, without a class telling you, oh yeah, elves are great as hybrids between combat and spell casting, you don't necessarily need a class to tell you that. There is sort of, almost like zeitgeist knowledge we all share that says elves are good in combat and also have a flair for the magical. And so he's somewhere in between here. So while Rana is this dream walker, sort of searching for these sort of world explanations, what are these visions that he's having of these fires and of the doom of the Frog Empire and like what can be done about it, right? That's kind of Rana's motivation. Sean, and we all, except Rana, everyone used the rollable character prompts, which are prompts for your equipment and your story and stuff like that in Crown and Skull. And then rolling those up, they sort of struggle to explain them. Sometimes the thing you get on roll tables can be like, oh, well, how can I really get into that? So with Sean, he is an escaped prisoner of the dwarves. Now, up in this northwest corner of our world, there are two factions of dwarves. One quite cruel and one good, who are sort of a rebellion against these cruel dwarves. And as we go into all these recaps and this season unfolds, you guys will learn all about this stuff. But Sean is an escaped elven prisoner. Now, he escaped just after his cousin. So once again, my group, they love bringing family into the story. Family is kind of, it's a classic element of a great many stories. And so his cousin escaped first, but these dwarves were doing something cruel to these elves. And we don't really know yet because Sean's memory is cloudy, because I really don't want to just be too on the nose with it. But he's searching for his cousin and is a little bit touched. Is a little bit touched in the mind. Now, also in Crown and Skull, as you guys will be discovering, there are flaws which can buy you points, basically buying you discounts on the custom things you build for your character. And I've noticed that with every player that I've introduced Crown and Skull to, these flaws become center points of their characters. And with Sean, this sort of slightly crazy sort of flaw is really a rallying point for him, a campfire, if you will. And I think what he's looking for is a fun way to dig into some impetuous behavior. In the past, he's always been very sensible and very rational. And I think he's looking for some bias and some reason to blast into play and to be over dedicated to the mission and to risking his life. And this is solid gold dancers as far as a GM goes. I love this kind of stuff. Now, our third and fourth characters are best friends. So first we have Morph. Morph is a halfling, or in Crown and Skull, what we call Proudfoot, is a Proudfoot guard. So Morph used to work back in the Middle Lands as a guard for a cult. So basically someone who stands outside the cult grounds with a halberd and an oversized helmet and armor and, make sure that no ne'er-do-wells or unwanted riffraff enter the cult grounds. By a series of dice rolls and a kind of a discussion during character creation, we decided or discovered that this cult worshipped a Formian guru. So their guru is a Formian, so an ant-like humanoid with sort of 4 arms and 2 legs, 6 limbs total. And this Formian guru would sit in this like yurt and meditate with these compound eyes and these sort of bizarre insights from the multiverse, and sort of almost hypnotize the cult's members into these weird Formian concepts, which basically lead to subservience, as all cults do. Now, since Morph was only the guard to the cult, he was a little less exposed to this constant Formian kind of mind screw, right? He's just kind of working away his days guarding the outer perimeter, not sitting there staring at this ant face, which, if you think about it, is a really fucked up center point to a cult. So anyways, one night, Morph is just like, this is freaking crazy, and runs for it. Abandons his post, and for this reason is pursued by these Formian cult members. This is one of his key flaws. But the rest of the details of his character were mostly generated through prompts, which we improvised on together, especially his equipment, right? He said, why would a Proudfoot have this like 8-foot halberd? And he said, well, it seems like a character you would see like guarding a gate or something. And that's how we started sort of finding our way into this concept. So you'll be seeing these miniatures appearing on my Instagram or on Patreon or wherever I post photos. I've been trying to do some posts on YouTube as well. So you'll see the miniatures, and all this stuff is really going to click for you. So that's Morph, a Proudfoot fighter, basically, a Proudfoot guard, you could say, as their type. And so he's using his hero points and building out his introductory character while we move to our final character, which is Cyprus. Cyprus is a female Proudfoot and has fled her home because these fissures. And so both using role prompts and using a world map and doing a lot of this, we realized through a series of improvisations and dice rolls that Cyprus fled her town because half of it fell into a freaking crack that just opened in the ground. And when this crack opened in the ground, these sort of spider-like creatures that aren't quite just spiders, we call them in Crown and Skull Spiderkin or the Children of Obleth. There's sort of various forms of spider being are pouring out of these fissures, and Cyprus lost track of her family and barely escaped with her life. As these things are spreading, she is just fleeing her homeland and basically is no longer pursued by these creatures, but never wants to go back, is basically afraid to go back. This set her life in motion. Now, Cyprus and Morph have decided, my players, Jimmy and have decided that they are best friends from long ago, that they lived in separate towns, but they've always kept in touch and they've always been bosom buddies, the kind of friends who go fishing together, who entrust each other with every secret and every family problem. And when Cyprus flees her hometown, which direction does she happen to go? Out near where the Formian cult is hidden in the forest. And Morph is running through the forest as well. And they almost have this moment of like running and slamming into each other like proud feet often do, right? Well, what are you doing? Where are you running? I just fled this cult. I don't want to be part of it anymore. Where are you going? My town, half of it just collapsed into this canyon with these things coming out of it. And so they basically both make this agreement. Well, it seems like there's some kind of insect overrunment occurring. And Vorpal, you couldn't be more correct. And as we started to improvise into answers for this link, why is there a link between these insect story elements? I had to put a stop to that. I want to save that for another time. It's too good. So there's a link. Okay, sure, there's a link, but we're not going to talk any further about it. That's GM stuff or stuff that dice will determine later. So anyways, well, I'm running from my hometown. Well, I'm running from my hometown. And so they say, well, let's just go and not look back. And so they venture out into the world and eventually take a ship and are not wanted on this ship and have to hide. They're stowaways and get off of this ship and find themselves lost in the worlds of dwarves and elves and keep on looking for wilderness and then just find themselves lost up in these snowy mountains, not sure how to find their way back down. And anybody who's ever done high alpine backpacking knows this is a real thing. You're trying to sort of get over there. You can see a foresty valley over there, but the rocks are impassable here. So you're just going to go up over this snowy saddle, right? You're just going to go, how big could it be? And then you find yourself up on these snow fields and you have no idea which direction is which because snow is baffling. And that brings us to this exact moment. So we have Sean looking for his cousin, fleeing the dwarven captors he once knew. We have Rana emerging from this hermit's cavern up in the snow, basically having teleported from the dream realm in almost like a rebooted body, reforming in his most primal state from the dream realm with almost no equipment at all. And then the two Proudfoots fleeing a world that they're staying away from, that they kind of never want to look back on, but lost in these snowy expanses. And because D&D stories are always so great, the four of them just happen to be in distant eye view of one another as our story begins. That is almost the end. That's about 2/3 of the way of our session 0 right there. So at that point, you know almost all there is to know about the origin of our 4 new characters for season 3. We have 2 elves and 2 Proudfoots. And this is kind of an interesting new mix for us. This is definitely different. It's meat and potatoes fantasy, that's for sure. We don't have anybody weird really in here, and no sort of weird, like no frogkin or, lycanthropy or any kind of oddball stuff. No mechanical people or crazy stuff like that. So we do have meat and potatoes, which I really like as the GM. It's kind of not up to me, but I always hope for like a GM, meat and potatoes kind of vibe. And they see each other, and because D&D stories are so great, they're kind of bumping into each other in these snowy highlands by sheer coincidence. But we do have like a nice link because 2 of these characters are already the very best of friends. So we don't just have who are you guys? We don't have that quite, that level. So there's already some nice connective tissue that's forming. And we're about 2/3 of the way through session 0. Now to finish up our opening session, of course, what else happens? In the distance, not too distant, they hear, ow, oh, 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 a few dozen cries of wolves. And these are high alpine wolves. These things are not like going to sort of skulk around and look at you. They want something to eat, and they're coming over the rise. Okay, as this happens, the 2 Proudfoots are coming out. Then you have Sean, and Sean is really the most vulnerable, right? He's not only alone, he has no shelter. He's just escaped, and he's like ragtag, right? So he signals to Rana, and Rana has this kind of, he's just kind of like just arrived here, but at least he has a small cave. They kind of group up. Then as the wolves are getting closer, the Proudfeets notice that there's a small cave, but it's filling with snow and drifting in and has to be abandoned. But remember the dreaming apostle? Rana doesn't want to leave this person to their fate, and so scoops them up and drags them, and they set out, and they see this huge rock formation on the next sort of ridge, right? And those of you, the very few of you who have seen all of the Crown and Skull book, have seen this scene, which it's called the outer marker of Hasgar's ruin. There are these mighty stoneworks, and the fantastic artist Luke Eidenschink did this piece for the book, so you will see it in the Crown and Skull book. But they see this thing, and they begin tracking through the deep snow, running from these wolves. Some of the wolves, a small cadre of them, are ahead of the others, and we have a brief combat, and this concludes session 0. They have no rest, they have no reprieve, and they're honestly a little bit beat up by this opening encounter as they stumble into the gigantic stairs that they find as the entrance to this great stonework. And when I say gigantic stairs, I don't mean like a shit ton of stairs. I mean each stair is about 5 feet, coated in ice, and extremely difficult to traverse each stair. This is a structure built by giants. Not sure what all that is. Okay, so that was session 0. Now we move forward to session 1. The struggle continues as they explore this great stonework, this sort of hall. The snow is collapsing on the entrance. The dreaming apostle is dying of cold and also has just been alive for way too long in this dream state, is not going to survive. And they're finding a way to fight back these wolves as they're exploring the immense interior of this space. In this interior space, there are huge drifts of snow, a layer of ice above the floor, and up at the far end, some kind of a platform. There's always sort of some kind of platform at the end of the space, right? This is D&D. So they go in and they begin exploring. They awaken from one of these drifts, this what I call an outcast giant. So this isn't a full snow giant. This is a sickly, sort of is he even alive, kind of ragged frost giant. In Crown and Skull, there is a brief mention that frost giants actually never fully die until they thaw into like water and mush. And so as long as they're extremely cold, they can actually be in a sort of state of undeath for an indeterminate amount of time. And that's kind of what they stumble upon, this sort of this unwell frost giant, what we call an outcast giant. So not like a full health one. This one is like not good, emaciated, weaker than any normal giant. They awaken this thing. They begin battling this thing. They're a little bit, in some ways, out of their league, thanks to an aid spell that we kind of had to nerf later. It was a little bit built wrong as the playtesting was concluding, but it was still kind of fun because it was sort of really made for a teamwork kind of vibe. They keep dodging this damn thing as it's running back and forth in this room, trying to crush them. They try to use this big pillar, but the pillar plan, kind of like chopping down a tree, kind of goes awry and hits the side of this stone structure and breaks a hole in the wall. This is the worst thing that can happen because now we've got another entrance for the wolves and the weather is coming in and this is no longer like a safe structure. So the wolves are coming in. Now we have a situation. Combat's getting a little worse. It's getting a little more desperate. As this desperation sort of unfolds, my players kind of finally manage to get the tide of battle. After all, the stats on this giant and these wolves are nerfed. This is session 1. These are very, very low danger creatures. They manage to get the tide of this battle in their favor. They block the entrance with snow, and then with a very well-placed series of arrow shots, Sean manages to collapse the opening that has formed in the side, and boom, they're sealed in there. They finish off the last few wolves, and they are safe. They proceed to skin these wolves and spend a bit of time by a small fire investigating this platform. They find a sort of crude map of the mountains, but it's really not a lot of detail there. It just has some kind of X down in its southeast corner. They decide to pursue this. Now, they don't know this, but there was a stone ladder, so like footsteps that are cut into the wall that go up to the roof. And there's actually a little lookout platform on the roof of this structure, but they never discovered that to, like get a lay of the land. Instead, they kind of said, I don't really want to live in this freezing rock church or whatever this is, this lookout cabin. I want to get the fuck out of here. That's kind of what they decided. So they're all just like, yeah, let's go do the shit. Let's get the hell out of here and live. And so they do. They just take this sort of clue that at least they have a bearing on which way is southeast, which they didn't have before. They didn't even know the way out of the mountains before, right? So this is a pretty heady discovery for them. So they get outside, they begin heading southeast, and they cross a hex barrier on our world map. And when you cross from one hex into another, you must make a Crown and Skull hex roll. Now, this is one of the coolest things in Crown and Skull. I'm very proud of it. There are, I think, 60 locations, each with 2d10 tables. So there are 1,200 total entries that are not random encounter tables. Don't let your mind go there. These are not random encounters. These are area specific. And it's a location and an event roll combined to create a hex roll. We get our first one of the campaign, and we get something quite interesting. The location is a sort of a bedrock expanse where the snow has been sort of blown away. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of a good environment. You kind of want rock in a deeply snowed environment. Like finding bare rock is kind of a good thing. And as the event, they find we roll up a little blurb which says like copper dwarves are here skirmishing with the Uller, who are kind of the nasty ones, and they're looking for allies. You get a brief little thing. So I need a couple of minutes to think about, okay, what does that mean? Skirmishing. All right, there's the key word. So they're fighting, but on a small scale. And then that second phrase, they're looking for allies. So real quick, I go over to our bookshelf. We have all of our miniatures now, like right by our game table, which is divine. So dig up a bunch of miniatures, kind of draw on our battle mat, get a sense for the space, get these miniatures down. These copper dwarves have just killed a small group of the Uller, but they are totally untrustworthy. A little bit of our players who come up like, hi, you know. So these dwarves sort of pull them in, and I want to drive home that the copper are the good and the Uller are the nasty. So the copper says, well, we may not know you, but here, come on in close. My fire is your fire. Have a piece of cheese. Their cheese is so hard and dense, they have to use a chisel to shave off little curly pieces of cheese. The amazing savory nature of this cheese already puts my players on a kind of a like, hey, you know, you guys are actually pretty cool. And then we do a couple of dice rolls because things are getting a little tense. And there was a weird comment made by one player. And thanks to these dice rolls, which were not favorable, the leader of the Copper Dwarves is like, I'm not sure that just meeting random adventurers in the middle of Uller's teeth I'm not sure that we trust you yet. But if you want to win our trust, our skirmishing is not complete. Our mission is not done. There are yet Uller dwarves down in the basin there. And like any code of old, in any feud, when someone is unknown and their dedication is unknown, their loyalties unclear, we require that you join our troop or make your way. But if you want us to let you into our troop, to trust you, each one of you will have to dispatch one of our blood foes. But if you choose to go on your way, no harm done. The hospitality of travelers has been offered and our code of honor has been followed. So my players are like, oh my God, seriously? So you want us to get right into the middle of this fucking feud and kill like 3 people we don't even freaking know? Just a sec, huddle up. So they kind of huddle up. They're talking, and the Copper Dwarves are kind of looking at them, emptying off a little wooden cask. What do you? I don't know. They don't look like they're so sure. Maybe they don't know who the other dwarves are. And then finally, I don't know what pixelated hankering means. Is my signal terrible today? I don't know. I'm going now. One of the most distracting and horrible things about the internet. Well, I'm sure video degrading. Fantastic. Well, we'll just kind of sit here. You're fine on my end. Yeah. It always kind of, okay. So we get a little bit of a, do any of us really remember anything about the Uller Dwarves? And here's time for Sean's backstory to pop up. He pops up. It's like, wait a minute, the Uller Dwarf, they're the ones that had me in prison. And he instantly just starts, we'll do it. And he starts going down this hill into this basin where there's a little group of Uller dwarves encamped. They don't know they're being stalked. And Sean is now my player getting this dream he wanted, this kind of impetuous reason to blast into gameplay, to not hesitate, to keep things moving, to risk your life, to go for it. He's got it. His backstory lines up with what's occurring. Remember, we rolled this shit. I didn't decide this as what's going to happen in session 1. We rolled this shit. And it, of course, because all dice are haunted, lines up with his backstory in just such a way. He's like, let's go do this. They hike down this goat path. There they are. We're going to pull it together. Let's plan some kind of little ambush. It's too late. Sean's already running out there, drawing his blade, ready to kill. They're like, oh, fuck, this is the worst way that we could. But, of course, they're noticed. So the Uller dwarves sort of get into position, start firing arrows, crossbows, of course. You don't do this with a crossbow. You do this, pew, 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 right? So they almost really lost all their advantage because of this impetuousness, which is the joy of flaws and backstories. And now we have this pitched battle with Uller dwarves who are savage snow fighters. They're in their normal environment. My guys are out of their normal environment. At this point, we have been playing for ages. Ages. It's well past midnight. And I've also been working on Crown and Skull in its final playtest phases, day in, day out, from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep. So finally, that's the end of the session, guys. Mid-combat, mind you. I know, 10 GM demerits for me. I take a shot to the chones and ask for another because you're not supposed to do that shit. But I was so exhausted I had to do it. So we call session 1 mid-combat with the other dwarves. We luckily, and I'm grateful for this, we play in the basement so we can leave everything exactly as it was. So nothing is moved. All the counters and all the dice, everybody's sheets, everything is exactly where it sits, like a museum display. And that was session 1. So we're going to open up session 2 as which I guess you could call it session 3, depending. Mid-combat, as my players have joined this dwarven feud, I cannot stress hard enough how this opening story beat of our campaign was rolled, was not conceived by me. I decided nothing. All I did was coach them through the creation process, coach them through this sort of Hasgar area, which they agreed was where they were going to start the season, and then coach them through the rolling of a hex roll when they cross a border. It has all been emergent and made itself. And as you guys will find out in the coming weeks and months, that Crown and Skull, and the term we've been rallying around in the community is that Crown and Skull is a world engine. It's hard to describe how powerful this stuff is, because it's not just random encounters, which can be a little zany. If anybody's ever really used them and trusted them, they can kind of break down in a lot of ways, because it's sometimes a little bit hard to get your mind around why this random encounter is happening. And it's because the word random. Now, no fault against random encounters. They're fantastic. I love them. But the hex roll system and some of the other, like the tactics systems and stuff in Crown and Skull, are not random. They are location specific. They are enemy specific. They are dialed into a thing to where they will make sense as written. And for this to happen and to link into this backstory, this is the beginning. This is the opening beat of season 3. So look forward to these recaps picking back up now that we are back in the flow. And July is almost over, which is always our most difficult scheduling month as far as playing D&D. So our next session, I believe, is July 24th. So we'll be opening that session up then. And then I've got a second group which is formed, and their opening session is the very next day, July 25th. So I'll be telling you about those guys. Now, since we are playing in Crown and Skull, and playing from PDFs can be so difficult and challenging, I have ordered some bootlegs. So I'm going to show these bootleg copies to you guys when they arrive. They should be here in a few days. But these are basically just backwater, totally not authorized doo-doo copies of Crown and Skull that we can play with at the table while these sort of awesome books get made, which are going to take, the rest of summer here. And I'll show you these bootleg copies. It's just a thing that from my end of the hobby is kind of critical. I live in this world where it's this never-ending sort of creation and design cycle, right? And being a creator and a designer can sometimes be at odds with, because you're playing on the razor's edge of something, like like this final sort of playtest phase, and that can be difficult for players, and it can be a mind explosion for me. So it's really nice to be a little bit past that, get back to playing as the primary focus. And to do that, we need these bootlegs. So it's going to be fun to show those when they arrive. They're so natty. I put them together and hit the green button in a span of like 15 minutes on my laptop. So it's going to be really funny and they're pre-proofreader. So I do my best, but I suck compared to professional proofreaders. So it's going to be hilarious. They're not for public consumption. Anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Friday. And I hope y'all enjoying. I'd like to send a quick thanks out to House and Jake. They're the ones who have been helping me with all the amazing improvement of my whole sphere lately. So why YouTube is so cool, why the mainframe has been coming out, why there's so many more views and stuff sort of working out on YouTube lately, why we get the blogs are now coming out regularly, Patreon posts are coming out regularly. I'm doing all the things. And honestly, it isn't more work. It's just having someone to tell you what to do is so clutch for a mind like mine, which is kind of insane. And usually mired deep in something like Crown and Skull. So now I'm in that weird part where Crown and Skull is pretty much done as a creative project. and now it becomes a business project. So we work on promotion, we work on how we're going to get it, how we're going to do pricing, how we're going to get the warehousing, and how we're going to do all this stuff. By the way, we're doing everything on our own. We're bootstrapping everything independently. We're not using Kickstarter. We're just doing it ourselves. We're walking the lonely road, lone wolf and cub style, and it's going to be badass. I'm insanely proud of it. It's volume 1 of Crown and Skull, so volume 2 is already out there in the creatosphere somewhere, and really, really excited to bring this vision and this system to everybody. It's like a system that just makes what I do week in, week out so fun, and it's like I've been wanting to sort of express this. It's just taken all this time from the beginning of the Dirty Jobs experience until now, so just about 3 years, to not only do the sort of content of the world, but the system as we broke OSE down into pieces, destroyed it, ruined it into our OSE hack PDF, which many of you downloaded, and then continued to erode it down and down and down to where it became Crown and Skull. And fucking dope. All right, thanks for tuning in, you guys. I've got to go eat some food and enjoy my Friday night. It's beautiful. Hot weather is here, and it's freaking awesome. You guys got to keep it real. Don't steal, and you're always going to get a deal. Remember, it's a crazy world out there. There's a bunch of nutty shit happening, mean people doing stupid crap. But if you just try to make one person's day just a little bit more better, in a big way, in a small way, and if all of us do that, it's going to be a better world. All right, you guys, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on that old internet, and a special shout out to all my patrons right now. Y'all made Crown and Skull possible for real. Y'all paid my rent while I worked on that shit, and I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys on the internet. Until next time. I've been there and I've seen it, and I mean it when I mean to my players and they seen it. My name is Enid, and I mean it. I've been there and I've seen it, and when I mean to my players, I mean it. Yeah.